association game. I give you a name,
Sure.
and you got to give me a name back, the first thing that comes to your mind.
Name a word.
A word.
A name.
Or, no, a word or a phrase, okay?
Gotcha. Oh,
Ready?
I can do phrase.
You can do a phrase.
Sure, okay. Careful.
All right. This is a family-friendly.
Okay,
Saints quarterback Drew Brees.
Hero.
Bears quarterback Jay Cutler.
Competitor.
Bears linebacker Lance Briggs.
Fierce.
Bears owners Virginia and George McCaskey.
Owners.
Okay, fair enough.
Wow.
Denver,
I didn't see that one.
We did some prep, but I didn't give him all the stuff.
Yeah.
Denver quarterback Peyton Manning.
Unbelievable.
Former Broncos and Jets quarterback Tim Tebow.
Athlete.
NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell.
Formidable.
Okay, that's a respectful answer. Former NFLPA Director Gene Upshaw.
Legend.
Thanks for having a little fun. Safety has been a big issue of yours. Concussions, and I know there's a new agreement that you're sort of negotiating. Talk to us about some of the safety provisions that you're trying to implement into the league to make sure the players are kept healthy.
Well, the new CBA, we made the decision, and again, it came from the leadership around me, not necessarily me. I serve at the pleasure of players.
Yeah.
And really blessed with guys like Jeff Saturday and Cornelius Bennett, people who are on our executive committee, really guiding the way in which football as a business should be played going forward. But the work rules for our players in this new CBA are intended to change football. I know that almost sounds like an anathema, but change it to make it better. So there are no more two-a-days. There's strict work rules on how long players can be kept on the field. There's limits on contact practices during the regular season to 1 day a week. There is a longer off season for our players because we know from our physiologists and our neurologists that it's important to allow the body to heal. And to be blunt, we instilled measures in this CBA that are strictly designed to prevent coaches from being able to work guys as long as they want. And I know that there are coaches in the National Football League who are upset about it. I've certainly talked to any number of owners who aren't thrilled with being able to practice 24 hours a day. And their argument is simply, well, D, what you've done and what the players have done is made it harder to get coaches and allow them to get teams ready to play. Well, that's their job. Their job is to figure out under the rules how to get their teams ready to play. And our concern was that for years when we had coaches in other cities and towns coaching players, your team, for example, we had coaches who were violating strict rules on how long players could practice. So they would have a practice for 3 hours in pads, and then you would have a coach go into the locker room and tell players that there's an opportunity period for players to go back out on the field and practice again in pads, and that opportunity was open to anyone who wanted to keep their job.
And when you're talking about keeping your job,
who's
you're
going to
suit up and go out there.
Of course you will. And my concern and our concern leading into the new collective bargaining agreement was no owner stopped the coaches from doing that. The commissioner of the National Football League didn't stop the coaches from doing that. No committee stopped anybody from doing that. It was time for rules to make people to stop doing that. So in addition to the new safety rules, we increased the neurocognitive benefit, where for the first time it reaches backwards in time to take care of players who had prior cognitive injuries. And we also removed the obligation of you having to prove that you had a neurocognitive injury on this date playing in this game. The only thing a player has to show under the new neurocognitive benefit is that they actually have a neurocognitive injury. And benefits will then come to them and then their survivors.
And this is while they're playing or in retirement or both?
Both.
Okay. Okay.
Both. So, it didn't make much sense to me that, that in order to get a benefit, a player would have to prove that on a certain Sunday 10 years ago, they suffered a concussion on this play, and that was the cause of their early dementia or Alzheimer's. No, the new neurocognitive benefit looks to see whether or not you have an injury, and if you do have an injury, you get the benefit. I really believe that we are simply an extension of the organized labor movement, the civil rights movement, the battle for human rights. Last year we had 4,500 reported injuries. There's only 2,000 people who play. So when we are thinking about the game, there's certainly the hype, the love, but one of the pictures that flashed up on that screen was a young man, now old man, named George Taliaferro. You saw his picture. George was the first African American drafted into the National Football League. And if you sit down with him and embrace his love of football, but also what he went through as a drafted player being sent to a team and told that he wouldn't have health care. Every now and then, those are the kind of things that get a union leader kind of jazzed up to keep himself into the fight.
Some of the other rules that have been changing, the on-the-field rules where, you can't hit with your lead with your head and stuff like that. And as a fan, sometimes, when someone on my side of the ball makes a great hit and gets flagged, I'm like, oh my God, isn't this supposed to be football? How do you respond to that? How are the players responding to that? Because we know they get frustrated sometimes.
Sure, and they certainly do. When on-field hits result in either a flag or a fine, one of the things we changed under the new CBA is there are neutral arbitrators that are picked by both the union and the league. Neutral arbitrator are former players, former coaches who hear the appeals from players, and we believe that that's a good dispute resolution system. But look, here's the reality. I love the game, but if it is, how many people remember the hit that Sheldon Brown leveled on Reggie Bush? One of the most devastating hits of all time. I represent both Reggie Bush and Sheldon Brown.
Yeah.
So the guy delivering the hit and the guy receiving the hit are both members of our union. And I want both of those men to not only enjoy the game, but I want both of those men to be able to remember their kids' names when they're in their 50s. I want them to be able to pick up their grandkids. I want both of them to be able to walk down steps without pain. So if the cost of that is modifying football to make it safer, I'll never apologize for taking those stands over player safety. And it seems to me that that's not only the moral thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. How many people here are fans of football? Okay, if I told you in 1 year, that 26 young men lost their lives playing football, what would you think? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And if you said that the next year 19 young men died playing football, or the next year 11, and then 11, then 26 and 32. Statistically, that's what happened between 1909 and 1920. And these were college players who died on the field. What people don't remember is that Columbia banned football. Duke banned football. And it was in that crucible of deaths on the field that Teddy Roosevelt, as president, stepped in and said, we need to change football. They outlawed things called the flying wedge. They outlawed crippling tackles where players designed tackles for one guy to go at the legs, one guy to go at the shoulders. And the idea of the tackle was to break a player in half. Well, between 1921 and 2013, we still managed to keep all of you as fans of football. So yes, football changes over time. It morphs, it evolves. But the idea that there is something called football, that there is some sort of inviolate mass of something that doesn't change and doesn't morph is really a fiction. Mm-hmm. Football isn't the same football that I played when I was in high school. How many people, guys who played football, remember when we were playing that the idea was to go through two-a-day practices and they would deny you water? And the idea of denying you water was designed to do what? Make you tougher.
Yeah.
It just turns out that that's the dumbest thing on the face of the planet. Right?
I wish I had you on my side when I was playing high school football
look,
to talk to my coach.
I wish I was there, but all of us had that coach where you were in the middle of the day looking over at that ice bucket, remember? And you're just dreaming of when can I get to the bucket of water? And we all did it. And yes, we got through it. Yes, in some sort of psychological way, we believed that we were tougher. But there's no practice in college or high school or the pros today that doesn't have water available at all times. Why? Because the physiologist will actually tell you that the more water you get in your body, the better athlete you're going to be.
Right.
Well,
right.
Football changes.
Right.
And our goal is certainly to make sure our fans enjoy the game, but to be smart about the people who play it and the game that they're playing.
Let's talk about another beverage that some of our athletes like to indulge in. Certainly these are young guys. Yep. They live a lifestyle where drinks, alcohol is readily available to them. We have had a couple of very unfortunate incidences of driving under the influence, and I know that this has been a big issue for you. Yep. And you've been negotiating on how to handle that. Give us an update
Sure.
on where that stands.
Look, drunk driving and driving under the influence isn't a football problem, it's a social problem. And in the same way that there are ills that plague our community here in Chicago, I don't have to explain to anyone about the dangers that our young people are facing on the streets each and every day. Firearm violence is a social problem. Have we had issues with football players and firearms? Absolutely. So we decided to really take a look at addressing the issue in the same way that we would address social fixes. So we conducted a study about a year ago to really understand when drunk driving arrests occur, who's involved, and when they occur. What we found out was that more often than not, it's year one, year two players who are involved in incidents. More likely than not, those incidents occur between 6 o'clock on a Friday to 4 a.m. On an early Saturday morning. And they tend to involve two of our players as opposed to players individually. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we wanted to do was, okay, now that we understand it, how do we target it and try to change the behavior? And I know that there are columnists out there who are just interested in punishment. There's those who just say there should be mandatory bans on you for the entire season. But I can tell you, I was a prosecutor for 12 years. I put more people in jail than anybody in this room combined. But what we found out in those years of fighting the drug wars is that incarceration and punishment don't work. What do? You try to educate people about the dangers of being involved in that business. You try to decrease or wean people away from dependency on alcohol and drugs. You try to make them smarter about the decisions that they make. So that's something that we've done in our locker rooms. We just announced a new partnership with Uber, which is a worldwide car service, and that was designed to fill the breach in the ride service that we had. We've had free ride services for our players since I've had this job. But the other thing that we found out through the research is that very few players will take the affirmative step up front of securing a ride for themselves going out because they don't obviously intend
Right.
on getting driving under the influence. When people are arrested and go to drug court or alcohol court, nobody intended to drive over the limit.
Yeah.
You went out, you had too much to drink, you got behind the car and you left. So Uber is designed to give you a ride once you are where you are. Every player has a $200 Uber credit that is paid for by the NFL Players Association. If they tweet about Uber or talk about Uber, they get another $100, $200 in credit. So we've got a system where our players have an opportunity to use it. We do our best to try to educate them about making smart decisions, not to avoid punishment, but if you talk to your sons and your daughters about making smart decisions, everybody in this room who has kids know that you can either say if you do X, you're going to get grounded, or you have a conversation with them and you say, the reason why I don't want you to do X is because it negatively impacts not only your life, but the life of people around you. And you have a personal responsibility to yourself to not only look out for you, but look out after your brother. And that, I think, is the way in which we have to approach it, and that's what we've done.
The whole HGH thing. Some that are a bit critical of the NFLPA because it's been an issue on the table, but Major League Baseball, of course, again, got out in front of the players. So where does that stand, and what is your stance on that kind of testing?
You know, three quick questions about HGH. How many people here understand how an HGH test works? Very few. How many people believe that they have HGH already in their system? Right. The reality is everyone in this room has naturally occurring HGH in your system. Very few people understand how the tests work, and there's only one reason for that. WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, right now has the exclusive test for determining how an athlete or whether an athlete has improperly taken HGH. Our problem with WADA is they will not tell you or us how they reached a determination of what's an unlawful level of HGH in your system. They just won't tell you. So what they've done over the past few years is they've created this study group. They have purportedly determined the appropriate levels of HGH or the lawful levels of HGH. That is a standard that you can't see, I can't see, we can't touch. It hasn't been peer reviewed, hasn't been scientifically tested. There's no articles about how that happened. And if they determine that you have somehow violated this amorphous standard, you are banned as an athlete from participation. Now, WADA is the group that said that their test is foolproof, their test is scientifically valid. The only thing we found out after we took the stand about HGH was that there was an Olympian who submitted an A sample of a test. WADA came back and said, you, sir, we've made the decision that you've tested positive, quote unquote, for HGH. He said that that's impossible. Test my B sample. They tested his B sample, they came back and it said, oh, it looks as if you haven't tested positive for HGH, but you're nonetheless suspended. Suspended. The player, the athlete challenged the suspension and they added another year onto his suspension for challenging it. Ultimately, that player went through a 2-year hearing in front of the World Court of Arbitration. And last year, the World Court of Arbitration came out with a ruling that said that WADA's standards are imprecise and therefore unfair, and it overturned his ban. Now, I know that that isn't of particular concern to some columnists. I know that fundamental due process fairness isn't the type of thing that's going to get a group of people to buy your magazine or buy your newspaper article. But if you are in a world where you are going to be measured against a test that you can't see and it would take you years to challenge, who here would sign up for that? You wouldn't. So what we offered and what the National Football League agreed to do was test all 3,000 players who were in camp at the beginning of the season. All of them would be tested for HGH. The league and the NFL Players Association agreed upon a world-renowned scientist to conduct the analysis in order to determine the standard for the appropriate level of HGH. That would be done in a double-blind way. We both agreed to it. At the end, there would be a decision limit reached. If a large group of players tested positive, they would go into reasonable cause testing. But at least we would know, and both the league and I would understand what the standard is for HGH. The commissioner agreed to do that. The National Football League agreed to do that. I signed the letter authorizing the population study. And today that letter continues to sit on Roger Goodell's desk, unsigned, because the league is insisting on the commissioner hearing all of the appeals in a certain amount of cases where a player has not tested positive for violating the drug and substance abuse policy.
That could take months, years.
Or it could take 0.5 seconds for a man to put his signature right next to mine, right?